What's up guys, Stupid Hippie here, and this is my first topical video. So like I said in my first video, topical videos aren't going to be very common because for the most part, there are much better political commentary channels who can say what I could say much better than I could and who likely know much more than I do about politics. However, I'm going to be making a topical video today because this is a topic that no one is really covering. It could be in part because this is local to my state. However, I think it is very important, and I think it is something that I should bring to a wider audience, or at least an audience of 5 people who watch my videos. So, this video is going to be about the LDS Church. I know that for a lot of people brings a wide array of emotions, whether they are members and they love it, or they are people who despise the church. Specifically, a new law that is trying to be passed and has recently been passed that the LDS Church has countered. But before we get into that, for those who don't live in Utah, I'd like to tell you a short history of why it matters whether or not the LDS Church agrees with the law or disagrees with the law. Well, in Utah, we have an economic system or a political system known as churchlegislature. No, that's not an official term, but it is the term to talk about how a majority of our legislature and a majority of our politics have to be approved by the LDS Church or supported by the LDS Church in order to pass. So a good example would be recently, or not recently at this point, but I think it was about a year ago with Proposition 2. Proposition 2 was a proposition to bring around legal medical marijuana. Of course, the LDS Church wanted to block the bill. So they told all of their members, all of them, to go and vote against the bill. Now, everyone knows that that's a direct violation of separation of church and state, and that is a church directly involving themselves in politics. However, it shouldn't matter because the Proposition 2 bill passed. Somehow, marginally, we actually got Prop 2 passed, and it came into law for, I think, less than a month, if even at all. Because shortly after the people of Utah had voted for the bill, it was just blocked and shut down by our politicians anyway. So it didn't go anywhere. And I think, I'm not sure where the status is at this point, but I think there is a replacement bill that is coming in soon or has already come in that pretty much does nothing. All I know is we voted for Prop 2, the LDS Church didn't want Prop 2, and despite telling all of their members to vote against Prop 2, it went through, and our politicians shut it down anyways because screw democracy, am I right? So yeah, the LDS Church has a large amount of power in our politics. And a lot of people I've heard try to make the argument that separation of church and state is kind of an attack on freedom of speech, because if a union could tell its members what to do and how to vote, or if a workforce could tell its members how to vote and what to do politically, why can't a church? It's just a group at the end of the day, isn't it? But I have one huge disagreement with that for one reason. With a union, if you disagree, what's your punishment? A slap on the wrist? With your workplace, if you disagree, what's your punishment? A slap on the wrist? However, if you're systematically disagreeing with your church, you may start to question whether or not you are on the right side of spirituality, of your spirituality. Especially if you believe in a religion which has a prophet that can communicate directly with God. If you're disagreeing with what the prophet says, you may be disagreeing with God. And if you disagree with God, that's kind of scary, and it might actually make you think that your chances of going to heaven are less because you're not following what God believes in. And that's a lot more intimidating for a lot of people. And this goes for any religion, not just the LDS Church. However, it's especially strong with the LDS Church because they believe that they have a prophet that can talk directly to God. And like I said, and I cannot state this enough, if your prophet says something, you better believe it, because your prophet can talk to God. And if you disagree with the big man upstairs, that's kind of scary. And a lot of people don't want to do that. So even if their church says something that they feel is wrong deep inside, they're going to do what the church says because that's what God wants. And what God wants, you should do if you want to be a good moral person according to your church. So I think that whole comparison is rather silly. It's obvious that the church plays, that a church, any church actually, not just the LDS Church, but any church plays a huge role in people's lives. And anyone who's devout to their church is going to agree with what their church says. And if they're not agreeing with what their church says, maybe they should question their devoutness to it. But when it comes to union or workplace or friends, anything like that, you don't have this whole argument over whether or not you're going to go to hell or not. Another thing is that church plays a much bigger role in people's lives than a union or a workplace. Sure, people might love their union, might agree with everything that the union believes in. However, at the end of the day, spirituality is like a major role of most people's lives, or lack of spirituality. Just religious beliefs or lack thereof tend to play a huge role in people's morality, people's views, and how people conduct themselves as a whole, whereas a workplace and a union, to a much lesser extent. So at the end of the day, I think the comparison between unions and workplaces and friends and whatever other group and churches is rather silly. And I think that a strong separation between church and state is the best way to have a non-biased political atmosphere, which this state definitely does not have, unfortunately. So, a new bill has come into fruition, and while I was writing the script of this video, or at least the outline of the video, the bill had not passed. So, good news, the bill has passed, but there's likely some bad news as well. Utah's governor, Gary Herbert, has tried to pass a bill to ban conversion therapy. Now, what exactly is conversion therapy? Well, let me give you a quick definition from a great article that I recommend you read by the Trevor Project. So, conversion therapy, sometimes referred to as reparative therapy, is any of several dangerous and discredited practices aimed at changing an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity. Conversion therapists use a variety of shaming, emotionally traumatic, or physically painful stimuli to make their victims associate those stimuli with their LGBTQ identities. According to studies by UCLA Williams, more than 700,000 LGBTQ people have been subjected to the horrors of conversion therapy, and an estimated 80,000 LGBTQ youth will experience this unprofessional conduct in the coming years, often at the insistence of well-intentioned but misinformed parents or caretakers. So basically, conversion therapy is a pseudoscience, often very tightly tied in with religion, telling you that what you believe is wrong, how you feel is wrong, everything that you know about your sexual identity is incorrect, and it is very emotionally traumatic for youth to have to think that way. Some statistics that I have that are pretty terrible is that in a study done by San Francisco State University, lesbian, gay, and bisexual youth who were rejected by their families and caretakers due to their identities were nearly 6 times more likely to report high levels of depression and more than 8 times more likely to have attempted suicide when compared to youth from accepting and affirming families and caretakers. And few practices hurt LGBTQ youth more than attempts to change their sexual orientation or gender identity. All youth deserve a climate in which they are loved and embraced. So, this is what we're trying to ban in Utah. Psychological torture. Psychological torture of LGBTQ youth. That's what we are trying to ban in Utah. Sounds pretty reasonable, right? Pretty sure if you went up to pretty much any single person in the entire United States and asked them, hey, would you like to ban any form of psychological torture on an innocent civilian? All of them would say yes. However, the LDS Church had a different take on it. So, the original bill that was passed, or attempted to be passed in October of 2018, was blocked by the LDS Church. So, this was their official statement. And keep in mind, the LDS Church has been trying to make strides to become more pro-LGBTQ. They have now allowed members to openly be LGBTQ. They are allowing missionaries to be LGBTQ with a few exceptions. There's that article, which is beautiful. And I digress. The LDS Church has been attempting to make itself appear pro-LGBTQ. And if you were to ask almost any LDS member, they'd say that their church is now becoming more pro-LGBTQ. If not, they already are pro-LGBTQ entirely. However, blocking a bill trying to ban psychological torture of children kind of hurts that ideology of your church being pro-LGBTQ. So, let's be fair and let's read exactly what the LDS Church said so I don't misconstrue or take anything out of context. This is the Church's original statement issued October 15th, 2019. So, here we go. The Church hopes that those who experience same-sex attraction and gender dysphoria find compassion and understanding from family members, church leaders and members, and professional counselors. The Church denounces any abusive professional practice or treatment. We teach the right of individuals to self-determination and the right of parents to guide the development of their children. We also believe faith-based perspectives have an important and ethically appropriate role in professional counseling. As detailed in the comments submitted by Family Services, the Church is concerned that the proposed professional licensing rule is ambiguous in key areas and overreaches in others. For example, it fails to protect individual religious beliefs, and does not account for the important realities of gender identity in the development of children. We therefore oppose the proposed rule in its current form and respectfully request that it be appropriately amended to address the concerns raised in Family Services comments, or that Utah's lawmakers provide statutory guidance on this important issue. So what does that mean? Basically, one of the major reasons that the LDS Church doesn't want this law to be passed is because they believe in the right of individuals to self-determination and the right of parents to guide the development of their children. So why would they support a bill that doesn't allow parents to guide the development of their children? Well, because in this case, the parents trying to develop their children are doing so by psychological torture. But I guess that doesn't really matter, right? That's just a detail there that I guess is kind of unimportant. Except it's not. It's not at all. This whole paragraph is pretty much saying, yeah, we'd love conversion therapy to be banned. However, we think families and parents should have the ability to choose conversion therapy as an option, because that's their right. They have a right to guide the development of their children. And if they want to develop their children out of being LGBTQ, conversion therapy is an option. We shouldn't be able to take that right away from them, right? But we're definitely pro-LGBTQ. No, nobody would fall for that. If this was Bernie Sanders, let's say Bernie Sanders, and he said, "My name is Bernie Sanders, and I believe that deportation is a human right. However, I'm going to be blocking the bill by Donald Trump to deport all Mexican immigrants because I also think that it is a human right for illegal Mexican immigrants to stay in the country. So unfortunately, I also want all Mexican immigrants to be deported. However, it is a human right for Mexican immigrants to stay in our country illegally." I apologize for that probably terrible Bernie Sanders impression, but the point is, nobody, no conservatives would fall for that because it's obviously BS. You can't say you support a bill banning something, but you also support the person's right to be able to choose that thing that you supposedly want banned. Nobody would fall for that. There's a million other examples I could think of. Oh, I definitely want guns to be banned, but I support people's right to own guns. Then you don't want guns to be banned. It's that simple. You can't want something to be banned while simultaneously liking people's ability to choose to do that thing that you supposedly want banned. Period. So, at the end of the day, if you want to be LDS, fine. This doesn't need to be a single-handed turn off and convert you away from the LDS Church. This is just evidence that, unfortunately, the Church is lying to you. Because the way I see it, you can't tell all your members that you're anti-conversion therapy to make yourself look good and make yourself look pro-LGBTQ if, behind the scenes, you think that parents have the right to be able to choose conversion therapy as an option. That is a blatant lie. That is a misconstruction of the truth. Like I said, Bernie Sanders said the same thing about deporting illegal immigrants. Conservatives would tell him he was an idiot and he was a liar. And if he said that, he would be an idiot and a liar. The last thing I want to end this off with is this. Like I said, if you want to be LDS, that's absolutely okay. However, with this conversion therapy thing being denounced by the LDS Church, there's only one of two things that could mean. It either means that the God that you worship condones the abuse and mental neglect of LGBTQ children, because if the prophet is the head of the church and the prophet heads all the important decisions that the LDS Church makes, he certainly had a voice in this decision. So, if the prophet can speak to God, he spoke to God, asked for his opinion, and God practically said, yeah, mental abuse for LGBTQ children, that's awesome, let's do that. Or you either believe that, or you believe that the prophet got it wrong, and if he got it wrong, then you would have to start to question whether or not his ability to talk to God was really all that powerful, if not there at all. Because if you don't believe that God would think that, and I'm pretty sure no one should believe that God would think that, then you either have to believe that the prophet doesn't talk to God when making massively important decisions, or that the prophet can't talk to God and he fabricated this entire thing. So, yeah, that's kind of a big bombshell, I would assume. However, like I said, there's been an update. So, the new bill that Governor Gary Herbert has rewritten has been passed, and both the LDS Church and LGBTQ have kind of worked together to make this bill pass. However, there's some important framing in the wording of this article that has me a little concerned. So, let's read it here. Just the first part. So, it says, Salt Lake City, Utah Governor Gary Herbert has struck a deal to craft a revised rule that effectively bans conversion therapy on LGBTQ children, Fox 13 has learned. So, effectively, that's kind of a concerning word. Effectively, a lot of the times in politics and news, means for the most part. Effectively and outright are completely different in regards of news media language. If this had said, Utah Governor Gary Herbert had struck a deal to craft a revised rule that outrightly bans conversion therapy, that would be totally different, and I wouldn't even be making this video. However, effectively, that obviously means that there's some gray room and some gray area. And when it comes to the literal psychological torture of LGBTQ children, there should be no gray area, period. And for those who support conversion therapy, psychological torture, let's keep that in mind, or support the church who supports psychological torture, I think it's safe to say that you are on the wrong side of history, my friend. So, yeah, Utah, LGBTQ torture. It's freaking awesome, isn't it? I've been wanting to make this video for a long time, but I've had a lot on my plate. I've been traveling, which has been amazing. I've had school start back up. So videos, even though they're already infrequent, they're likely going to become even more infrequent unless I get my act together. I'm scheduling a live stream debate with a buddy of mine, so hopefully I'll be able to make one of those pretty soon. But until then, I just had to make this video because even though it's kind of old news at this point, I think it's very important for people to know what they support and the kinds of things that are happening at a local level. So, yeah, it's been the Stupid Hippie here, and let's say no to psychological torture, and anyone who supports psychological torture, and anyone who says they don't support psychological torture, but they support the people's right to choose psychological torture as an option, because that's really dumb. So, yeah, peace out, guys. I'll see you in the next video, which is hopefully going to be an awesome live stream debate.